Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the BRS Apache button lock. This is a budget knife that is interesting, but it's got a flaw, and we're going to talk about it. Thanks so much to BRS for sending this in for me to take a look at. BRS makes some truly awesome knives, definitely. I'm going to link them right down below. Some of my favorite stuff has actually come out of BRS, including one of the most impressively priced integrals I've ever seen. So make sure and give them a look. Absolutely. Thanks so much to my generous patrons who are supporting me. There's a link for Patreon right down below, and please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. Let's go ahead and get a measurement of this guy. Overall length of the BRS Apache is coming in at about 6¼ inches. Blade length well under that legal line. People who live in the 3-inch states, that's going to be about 2.4, maybe 2.5 inches of blade, depending on where you measure it. There's an example right there. And then your cutting edge is coming in about 2.35, something like that. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons, just a few. Up against the Ontario Rad Model 1 and the Ontario Rad Model 2. So you can see here the height on the blade is giving it a little bit more presence than you might think, but it's still definitely like quite a bit shorter than the Rad 2. How about up against the Spyderco Para 3? And last but not least, let's go ahead and do the Benchmade Bug Out. I'll do one more. Let's do a more popular button lock here lately, the Civivi Chevalier. So there you go. How is the action of this guy? Well, that's kind of part of the problem. We'll talk more about that, but yeah, I'm going to push this button all the way down. Ready? Oh, it doesn't want to fall. Oh, but if you let it up, oh, what's going on here? You kind of do it halfway and it drops. You can whip it shut, no problem. The detent strength, or what's serving as the detent, which is really the plunge lock, off the flip is all right. You can also reverse flick it with that little cog-shaped thing. You can thumb flick it, right? It's just weird. You push this button all the way down and it gets stuck. Anyways, we'll talk more about that here in a sec. Let's go ahead and do carry profile. Thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. You can see here it's about the same. Length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3. You can see here it is fairly tall with that flipper tab, but nowhere near as long as either. So for the most part, it's really not going to be all that cumbersome. Materials, we are looking at G10 and D2, if you can't see it right there. On the inside, we have actually nothing, no steel liners or anything like that. All the steel parts that the bearings are going to ride on are actually in the pivot. Let's go ahead and weigh it. Definitely doesn't weigh a lot. I'm going to guess probably 2.5 ounces, something like that. Hey, almost 2.68 ounces. Pretty good ratios, honestly. I can't really complain there. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check. Get out my tools as per usual. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. That is a T9 and nobody needs that. Hang on. Right there. Okay. Pivot is pivot. I think that's actually a little bit bigger. It's captive, if you saw that little triangular piece on the other side, which is nice. Let's go with a T10. Am I right? Yeah. T10 pivot. And then we actually have T8 hardware, which is pretty cool. Sorry, the camera's just shaking all over the place today. T8 hardware. Nice touch, BRS, real nice. And then the pocket clip screws are going to be T6, which isn't that big of a deal. Pretty easy to take apart, even though it's a plunge lock. It really isn't going to be that. It should be pretty simple. Let's go ahead and do a measurement of blade stock thickness here. So blade stock thickness on this guy is coming in at about 125 thousandths on the money. So about what I'd expect. Good deal. Let's get into the meat and potatoes here. So this is kind of a little stumpy little knife, which is fine, actually. I don't know what it is about, like, if you're going to go with a little knife, like adding a bit more presence and height of blade just makes it a little more interesting. I don't really like little knives, and I especially don't like little skinny knives, right? So if it's going to be a little knife, I like that it's got a little bit more meat on it, even if I'm not necessarily gaining anything tangible. Well, I mean, it is. I'm gaining specifically tangible things, but I mean, that was the wrong word. I'm not really gaining any sort of like measurable utility out of there being a taller blade versus like a thinner blade that's just ground to have the same cutting geometry, right? But I just like it a little bit more. This is kind of a this is just barely a 3-finger knife. That 3-finger position is relatively comfortable. That pocket clip is nice and short, which is something that I really appreciate. But we do have kind of a pointy bill situation going on here. It doesn't need to be that high. You're going to feel it a little bit. It's not too bad because it's shorter, but it's okay. The G10 is peel ply textured, which is nice. It gives a little bit of traction without being too aggressive. These areas right here are nicely knocked down, nice chamfering all the way around the knife. Access to the flipper tab. I mean, this is a shorter knife where the flipper tab is positioned really well, and you can get enough leverage whether you are, push buttoning it or light switching it. It just feels pretty organic, so it doesn't feel like you are, having to cramp your hand to get it into a position where you're going to flip it and have it work properly. So that's good. I appreciate that. Little knives don't need flipper tabs. It really just takes away from the already limited room that we've got. I really dislike tiny flippers, but anybody who doesn't care, like if you're somebody who doesn't care that you can only get 3 fingers on the knife, then you're not going to care about that. The blade is a nice tumble to finish D2 blade with some interesting. BRS always does a good job of adding a little bit of character, something a little bit different, not just for the sake of it just being there. They just kind of, it's like they almost have a specific look without you being able to put your finger exactly on it. You look at it and go, that's probably BRS, right? Without being able to say exactly why. Would that work as a wrench? I don't know. Possibly. It might. I honestly didn't try it. Its main purpose is to assist in deployments, which it does an okay job of. It's just kind of awkwardly small, but you can get enough finger meat in there that it works. I really hate that I said finger meat. I'm sorry about that. Pause, deep breath. Let's get back on track. There's a flat that carries out about 60% or so the length of the blade, and the blade is pretty robust, not in terms of thickness. There's just a lot of material out here, right? It comes to a pretty hefty tip. Man, my dialogue today, I swear to God, I have to be less aware of what I'm saying and just let you guys fill me in the comments section. Taking time out of the review. Anyways, yeah, there's a pretty stout tip. No way around that one, guys. Sorry. And I wouldn't worry too much about destruction of that thing unless you're going to be abusing it. All the way around, the blade looks really good. I like it. Final cutting edge, it's fairly thick, but it'll do the job. General EDC and stuff like that, it's definitely going to do it. It could be thinner, but it's not really hurting anything. Nice little sharpening choil there, so no big deal. The rest of the blade, they just left everything else off it. It literally doesn't even say BRS. It just says D2. They put the BRS logo on the pocket clip, which is fine. It's the BRS Evolve logo. So yeah. The button is, it sticks quite a ways up, so while you're using it, there's really no way. Like, even in the most awkward, choked up position, my index finger still does not want to sit right on top of that button. So while you're using it, I would say it's virtually impossible to get it to disengage. You're going to have to be trying, right? The scenarios that you're going to find yourself using this knife in are not ones that would call for that much of a choked up position anyway, so I think you're going to be okay. Oh my gosh, there's no lanyard hole. Anyways, we have a backspacer that is kind of awkwardly sunk under the scales. Okay, I don't really like how that looks, but okay, it's not really hurting anything. Pocket clip, like I said, really good. They have sunk it in to the G10, which I prefer. Some people consider this an eyesore. I just don't care. I think it's better that it's sunk into the scales like that, or recessed into the scales. The screws themselves are also recessed into the clip. The clip is really great other than this bill. It's just a bit too high, but it's okay. Outside of that, the non-show side scale just has the captive side of the pivot over there. Lockup, completely and totally solid. The slightest hint of stick, which is fairly common in button locks. The slightest, maybe, am I feeling? No, I was moving it this way. Up and down, no detent lash. I mean, consistently smooth when it's riding on, like when it's got pressure from the plunge lock. And then there's kind of a, a decent just sort of click into place. So why is it doing this? We've reached the end of the review. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Centering, it looks to be maybe a tad off. Maybe we should try tightening it or loosening it. Let's see what happens there. Maybe that'll fix the action, right? It's not gonna. But let's see if we can get that back to center. It definitely came back to center. Oh, but it's real tight now. Woo, boy. Yeah, a little bit too tight now. So this is one of those knives where it might just, I might need to adjust the, oh no, are we good now? All right, never mind. I was about to say I'm gonna have to adjust it, but okay, it's back to normal. It's just from flipping it. Well, that's terrible. That comes off center. If you start to use it, I'd send it back. Loctite, folks. Loctite. Doesn't matter if you buy a $1,000 knife, a $5,000 knife, a $500 knife, a $200 knife, an $842 knife, or a $17 knife. You flip it and deploy it enough, and it's going to come off centered, even if it's Loctited, even if it's red Loctited. It's not that big of a deal. I honestly prefer that my knives don't come Loctited, and if they come off center, no big deal. And I can see, hey, do I need to put Loctite on this? Yes. Then you get to adjust it, get it perfectly centered into the action that you like. And then it stays that way until the next time it needs to be Loctited. Anyways, why is it doing this? I can tell you why. It's pretty easy. Right here, let's take a look at the Civivi Chevalier, right? When you, for anybody who doesn't know, a button lock is supposed to do this, right? As soon as you push the button, oh yeah, nice and smooth. Why? Because it's nice to be able to just push that button without having to wrist flip it, right? It's nice to be able to just push that button and have it drop right into place. With this guy, not enough pressure and it doesn't do anything. Too much pressure and it also stops it. There's like a sweet spot right in between. On the Chevalier, let's see if we can zoom in so I can demonstrate this. There is, you can see the plunge lock there, and when you push that button, there's an underside. See that black disc that's coming up out of right by the liner down here, right? So that disc is just, I guess, the setting into the liner. But right now, I'm not pushing the button, and it's just sort of riding on that plunge lock. You push it in, and that silver part comes off of the... Hold on to your knives. You push that button, and that silver part comes off of the blade tang, and it allows it to free fall, right? On this guy, the problem here, you can see that silver part coming down to the bottom. As soon as you push all the way in, that silver part is actually pushing on the blade, right? So right here, when I'm my finger's off of it, this part at the north side, that little disc, sorry, trying to get it to focus, that's putting pressure on the blade. Sorry, it's wanting to look at the carbon fiber in the background. So that's putting pressure up there. So pushing it all the way down. Now the underside is putting pressure on the blade. So you have to get that sweet spot where you kind of put right like that, and then it'll fall a little bit better, right? So that's what's happening there. BRS, that's the whole issue with this knife. When people buy a button lock, what they want is this. They don't want to have to do this. They don't want to have to go, right? I know it's not that big of a deal, and I know that there's even going to be people in the comments going, "It ain't that big a deal. Y'all need to quit your foot." You clicked on a video about a knife that is a button lock that is almost universally described as fidget factor, right? Which exists in the realm of completely and totally unnecessary and is a total contrast to the user community, or basically the people who think that anything past the buck 110 is total heresy and an abomination to the knife world, right? You are here. Right? So it's, I know it sounds arrogant to just strike something down as completely and totally invalid, but I'm going to strike that down as completely and totally invalid. No, on a knife like this, that should not be the case. When you push the button, it should fall. This is almost like, to be honest, it's kind of like what I expect button locks to be, how I would have expected them to be before some company figured it out. But the very first manual button lock that I handled that was like not an automatic knife, it just fell right away. So I never experienced anything like this. We can't have that disc applying pressure on the other side of the blade, the tang face, with the button being pushed all the way in, because it creates a less than desirable effect, right? And it's just straight up easier. I mean, when you're using a pocket knife, right, somebody from the user crowd who gets mad at people who, tune into the fine details of a knife and get upset with, in their eyes, some trivial aspect of it, right? I would argue that it actually, when you're working with a knife, right, your mind should be on the task at hand. You should not be taking extra time to fondle and look over your knife and appreciate every tiny little aspect every time you use it. No, you just should make the cut and put it away, right? Well, on a knife like the Civivi Chevalier, I think it's a little bit easier, even if it's just a microscopic amount of brain power that you can not devote to the knife and devote to whatever it is you're doing. This thing sometimes does that, and you're having to, screw around with it. You're going to get it about 50% of the time, and then the other 50% it's going to get stuck, and it's just annoying, right? On a button lock, it should just do this, and you should be able to just push the button and have it fall. So this is a cool knife. How much is it? I think it's like $52 to $54, which honestly would have been really awesome. Had the thing, really my only gripe with this, I'm like, yeah, well, it's small and I can't get 4 fingers on it, and the pocket clip has a little bit of a bill on it. But at 54 bucks, if the thing just had the typical button lock action that we expect from knives like this, honestly, I would have really enjoyed it. That's my only gripe with it. And BRS, I'd like you guys to do a button lock in the future. Even the same thing, maybe one a little bit bigger, or maybe throw a button lock on a knife that is completely and totally different than this. But you have to make sure that when that button is depressed, that you don't have some surface that's pinching up against the surface of the blade tang and keeping it from falling all the way down. It needs to be, I guess, the part needs to be cut deeper so that the maximum pressure on that button causes that surface to be slightly below and not engaging with the surface of the blade tang. Does that make sense? This is cool though, I like it. It's a cool knife. It's just, eh. And if if you go and read the reviews on Blade HQ, where I'm gonna link it, there's other people saying the same thing. So it's not like this is, a weird, just like a weird one. It seems like that's the case with all of them. So neat knife. Unfortunately, not recommendable because of that issue there, but it's still something that I'm going to give away on a live stream. So if you're thinking I wouldn't mind that, right? That wouldn't bother me. Well, join me for one of my weekend live streams and you might get lucky. I give away different stuff most weekends. Eventually this will be up. So if you're not subscribed and you needed a reason to subscribe besides the amazing and well-constructed content, right? Then subscribe for that reason, because I do that. Anyways, like I said, link to some awesome, BRS does make some awesome knives. I'm going to link their other stuff right down below so you guys can check it out. Thanks again to BRS for letting me take a look at this. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do of course have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.